They determined that every human being alive today descends from a single female ancestor. She lived in Africa between 300,000 and 150,000 years ago. 7 males and 7 females were produced at a time, each gestated in the womb of an Anunnaki birth goddess. The initial hybrids could function and work, but they could not reproduce on their own. Enki, the creator of humanity, defied the order. He warned a human he favored, called Zeusudra in Sumerian, Utnapishtim in Akkadian, and Noah in the Bible. Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm so excited to finally cover Zecharia Sitchin and the secret history of the solar system. Before we begin, I want to invite you to join the Reality Revolution community where I offer weekly coaching, exclusive content. You can find the link in the description at www.skool.com/reality revolution. In 1849, a young British archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard crawled through the ruins of ancient Nineveh in modern-day Iraq, beneath layers of sand and centuries of silence. He uncovered a library, thousands of clay tablets covered in tiny wedge-shaped writing that nobody could read. It would take decades before scholars cracked the code, and when they did, the translations shook the foundations of Western religion, archaeology, and science. Because these tablets, some of them 4,000 years old, some older, told creation stories that predated the Bible by millennia. They described a solar system with more planets than we knew existed. They recorded the orbits of celestial bodies we only confirmed with space probes in the 1980s. And they named the beings who gave this knowledge to humanity: the Anunnaki. One man spent his entire career translating these tablets and connecting their claims to modern science. His name was Zecharia Sitchin, and over the course of 7 books, the Earth Chronicles, he laid out a theory so vast, so detailed, and so strangely corroborated by modern discovery that the academic world had only 2 options: prove him wrong or ignore him completely. They chose the second. Today, we're going to go deep into the Sumerian texts, into the structure of the solar system, into the origin of Earth itself, into the genetic engineering of the human race. And by the end, you'll understand why some people consider Sitchin the most dangerous author of the 20th century and why others consider him its most important. Let's start with the big picture. The really big picture, the solar system. We all learned the same model in school. 9 planets, sun in the center, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Clean, tidy, done. Except the Sumerians, writing 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, described something different, something more. In their astronomical texts and cylinder seal depictions, they counted 12 celestial bodies in our solar system: the sun, the moon, which they considered a celestial body in its own right, and 10 planets, 10. One more than we have cataloged. Sitchin called it Nibiru, drawing from the Sumerian term meaning planet of the crossing. According to the ancient texts, Nibiru traveled in an enormous elongated elliptical orbit, swinging far beyond the outer planets before looping back through the inner solar system, crossing the orbital plane between Mars and Jupiter. Its orbital period, 3,600 Earth years. And here's where things get interesting. On one of the oldest cylinder seals ever found cataloged as VA243 in the Berlin Museum, there is a depiction of the solar system. The sun sits at the center, and around it, rendered in relative scale, orbit all the planets we know today, plus one additional body between Mars and Jupiter. Remember, Uranus was discovered in 1781, Neptune in 1846, Pluto in 1930. The Sumerians depicted all of them in correct relative size, more than 4,000 years before any of these discoveries. Sitchin argued that this knowledge was impossible through observation alone. The outer planets are invisible to the naked eye. Neptune sits nearly 3 billion miles from Earth. You need a telescope just to see it as a dim point of light, and yet the Sumerians described it. They described its color, blue-green. They described its composition, watery. They even gave it a name and described Uranus as its double. In 1989, when Voyager 2 flew past Neptune and sent back humanity's first close-up images, the data confirmed exactly what the Sumerian texts had recorded thousands of years before. Neptune was blue-green. It was watery. And it was strikingly similar to Uranus in size, color, and magnetic orientation. Sitchin had published these predictions 13 years earlier in 1976 in The 12th Planet. He had described Neptune as blue-green and watery, based entirely on his translations of Sumerian texts. When Voyager 2 proved him right, he wrote a follow-up article just 2 months before the flyby, essentially daring the universe to prove him wrong. It proved him right instead. The Sumerian creation epic, called Enuma Elish, tells a story that reads like cosmic mythology until you realize how precisely it maps onto modern astrophysics. According to the text, in the earliest epoch of the solar system, a large watery planet called Tiamat orbited between Mars and Jupiter. She had a retinue of 11 moons, including one unusually large satellite named Kingu, which was growing toward planetary status. Then came the celestial battle. Nibiru, referred to as Marduk in the Babylonian version, entered the solar system from deep space, traveling in a retrograde orbit. As it swung through the inner solar system, its gravitational force and its own satellites collided with Tiamat in a catastrophic series of impacts. The result, Tiamat was cleaved in two. The Enuma Elish describes this in vivid, almost cinematic detail. Nibiru's satellites, described as winds, struck Tiamat, first splitting her open. Then Nibiru itself delivered the killing blow, shattering the great watery planet and scattering her moons. Some of those moons were captured by the outer planets. Others were flung into bizarre retrograde orbits, becoming the comets we still observe today, messengers from that ancient catastrophe still carrying water ice from the body of the destroyed world. Modern comet science has confirmed this extraordinary detail when the European Space Agency's Giotto spacecraft flew through the tail of Halley's Comet in 1986. It found water, lots of water. Comet Kohoutek, studied by NASA in 1974, also revealed water and complex organic molecules. In fact, every comet we have studied closely has been found to contain significant amounts of water ice. The Sumerians said comets were fragments of Tiamat, scattered by the celestial battle. Modern science says comets originated from a breakup event in the inner solar system. The terminology differs. The conclusion is identical. One half was shattered into fragments. Those fragments became the asteroid belt, what the Sumerians call the hammered-out bracelet. The Hebrew word for this in Genesis is rakiah, translated as firmament, but its literal meaning is hammered-out bracelet. The bracelet divides the waters above from the waters below. The other half of Tiamat, along with Kingu, was thrust into a new orbit closer to the sun. That half became Earth. Kingu became our moon. The Sumerians are telling us that Earth did not form in its current orbit. It was created through a cataclysmic collision approximately 4 billion years ago, and the asteroid belt is the debris field from that collision. Now, the modern science, in 1978, Thomas Van Flandern of the U.S. Naval Observatory published a study in the journal IRAS, concluding that comets, asteroids, and meteorites all originated from a breakup event in the inner solar system. He stated that a large planet had disintegrated exactly where the asteroid belt sits today. His one unsolved question, how does a planet blow up? The Sumerians had the answer. It was struck by Nibiru. Modern planetary science has widely accepted the giant impact hypothesis for the formation of our moon, the idea that a massive body collided with early Earth, ejecting material that eventually coalesced into the moon. The favored impactor is now estimated at roughly 3 times the mass of Mars. The similarities to the Sumerian account are extraordinary. The collision, the formation of the moon, the debris, the timing approximately 4 billion years ago. Even the detail that Earth's crust is anomalously thin, as if a massive portion had been ripped away. Geophysicists have long puzzled by this. The moon's crust comprises about 10% of its mass. Mars's crust about the same. Earth's crust less than half of 1%, as if something had gorged away the surface of our planet, something enormous. The Pacific Ocean basin, nearing nearly a third of the planet's surface, has been proposed as the scar from this primordial wound, and the Sumerians called Earth Ki, a word meaning the celestial body that had been cleaved apart. Genesis tells us that the firmament, the hammered-out bracelet, divided the waters above the waters below. For centuries, this was treated as poetry, beautiful language with no scientific basis. Then we sent spacecraft to every planet in the solar system. Below the asteroid belt, Venus, once believed to be bone dry, was found by both Americans and Soviet probes to have once possessed vast oceans. Its rocks still carry the chemical signature of lost water. Mars, which NASA's Viking mission confirmed once had enough water to cover its entire surface several meters deep. Earth obviously remains 2/3 covered in water to this day. Above the asteroid belt, Jupiter's moon Europa is covered in ice, with a liquid ocean beneath Ganymede, and Callisto contain enormous quantities of water ice and likely subsurface oceans. Saturn's rings turned out to be made largely of water ice, chunks ranging from pebble-sized to the size of houses. Saturn's moons, Titan and Enceladus, are water worlds. Uranus and Neptune are both classified as ice giants, their very composition dominated by water. The ancient statement was precisely correct. There are waters below the firmament. There are waters above the firmament. The asteroid belt sits between them. Modern science confirmed every detail of this arrangement. The very arrangement the Sumerians described 6,000 years ago, and we only figured it out in the 1980s and 1990s using billion-dollar robotic explorers traveling at thousands of miles per hour across the void of space. So the question becomes unavoidable. How did they know? There's something that will rearrange your understanding of biology. According to the Sumerian texts, life on Earth originated from Nibiru. During the celestial battle, the seed of life was transferred from the invading planet to the newly formed Earth. Life was seeded from space. For most of the 20th century, this idea was considered absurd. Life arises spontaneously from chemistry. It emerges from primordial soup under lightning and heat. That was the orthodox view. Then, the evidence started piling up. In the 1970s and 80s, astronomers discovered organic molecules in interstellar space, amino acids, the building blocks of proteins drifting between the stars. Water molecules were found outside our galaxy. Complex carbon chemistry was detected in nebula, comets, and meteorites. In 1996, NASA announced the discovery of what appears to be a fossilized microbial life in Martian meteorite found in Antarctica, a rock that had been blasted off the surface of Mars by an impact and eventually fell to Earth. Whether those structures are definitively biological remains debated, but the mere possibility shattered the assumption that life was unique to Earth. Nobel laureate Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the DNA double helix, along with chemist Leslie Orgel, proposed in 1973 a theory they called directed panspermia. Their argument, life on Earth was seeded deliberately by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. This was published in the journal IRAS by a Nobel laureate in a peer-reviewed journal. The Sumerians said the same thing thousands of years earlier. They just named the civilization the Anunnaki. And they named the planet it came from Nibiru. Modern genetics has added another stunning detail. All life on Earth, every bacterium, every plant, every animal, every human being shares the same DNA code. The same 20 amino acids, the same nucleotide base pairs. Every living thing on this planet descends from a single ancestral cell. The consensus from the 8th Conference on the Origins of Life at Berkeley was unequivocal. All life on Earth evolved from one ancestor, one source, one seed that the Sumerians said came from the sky. Now this makes everyone uncomfortable because the Sumerians' account of human origins reads like a manual for genetic engineering written by someone who had already done it. According to the texts, the Anunnaki came to Earth approximately 445,000 years ago. Their mission? To mine gold. Their atmosphere on Nibiru was deteriorating, and suspended gold particles could serve as a protective shield. They established operations in southern Africa and Mesopotamia. But the mining was grueling. The Anunnaki workers, the rank and file, eventually mutinied. They refused to continue the labor. The solution proposed by Enki, the chief scientist among the Anunnaki, was radical. On Earth, evolution had already produced a bipedal primate, an ape man, capable of basic function but lacking the intelligence and capability the Anunnaki needed. Enki proposed upgrading this creature, jumping evolution forward, creating a worker. The text described the procedure in stunning detail. An egg was taken from an ape woman. It was fertilized in a glass vessel. The text described test tubes, or what the Sumerians called purifying baths, with the sperm of a young Anunnaki male. Genetic material was extracted from the Anunnaki's blood, specifically what the texts call tima, meaning that which houses that which binds the memory. We call it a gene. The fertilized, genetically modified egg was then implanted into the womb of an Anunnaki female, a surrogate mother, a birth goddess. The procedure was carried out in a facility called the Bit Shimti, the house where the wind of life is breathed in. The result was the Lulu, the mixed one, a hybrid, the atom. The word atom in Hebrew derives from Adama, meaning earth, but it also plays on the word dam, meaning blood. The earthling made from blood. The first atom was delivered by caesarean section. The attending scientist, Ninti, cried out upon seeing the newborn, "I have created, my hands have made it." 7 males and 7 females were produced at a time, each gestated in the womb of an Anunnaki birth goddess. The initial hybrids could function and work, but they could not reproduce on their own. Sound familiar? It should. In 1978, Louise Brown became the first human born through in vitro fertilization. The procedure involved extracting an egg, fertilizing it in a glass dish with sperm, and reimplanting the fertilized embryo in a womb. The doctors who performed it discovered that adding blood serum to the nutrient mixture was essential for success, the exact procedure described in the Sumerian texts. The creation of the first test tube baby, 20 years of trial and error, the ancient texts describe the same painstaking process of experimentation by Enki and Ninti, producing imperfect creatures before finally perfecting the method. A second genetic manipulation then gave the atom the ability to reproduce on his own. This is the biblical story of Eve, the rib, and the Garden of Eden. The Sumerian linguistic evidence is fascinating. The word T in Sumerian means both rib and life. The lady of the rib is the lady of life. The play on words only works in Sumerian, confirming the biblical story was adapted from an older source. In 1987, a team of geneticists at the University of California, Berkeley made an enormous discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. By analyzing mitochondrial DNA genetic material passed exclusively from mother to daughter through the generations unmixed with paternal DNA, they determined that every human being alive today descends from a single female ancestor. She lived in Africa between 300,000 and 150,000 years ago. The press called her Mitochondrial Eve. The date range is extraordinary because, according to the Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki mutiny, the event that triggered the creation of the Lulu, occurred approximately 300,000 years ago. The location matches too. The earliest hominid fossils, the candidates for the ape woman, whose egg was used, come from the rift valleys of eastern and southern Africa. The Sumerian texts say the creation took place above the Abzu, north of the gold mining region in southern Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, precisely where the fossils are found. Alan Wilson, one of the geneticists behind the Mitochondrial Eve discovery, later proposed that the human capacity for language originated from a genetic mutation in a woman who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago, a single mutation in a single woman that gave rise to speech in our entire species. The Sumerian texts describe exactly this. Enki's genetic modifications granted the atom intelligence and knowing, the ability to think, communicate, and eventually worship. The one thing Enki withheld was the full longevity of the Anunnaki. The atom would be smart, he would be capable, he would be mortal. Modern genetics has confirmed that longevity is genetically determined. Every species has a lifespan written into its DNA. The mayfly lives 1 day. A dog lives 15 years. Humans currently push past 100 in rare cases, but the ancient texts describe the Anunnaki living for tens of thousands of years because their planet's orbital period of 3,600 years means their biological clocks run on an entirely different scale. Enki gave us intelligence. He kept longevity for himself. The Sumerian texts describe events after the creation of the atom that echo through every major religious tradition on Earth. The most dramatic, the Great Flood. According to the texts, as humanity multiplied and spread, the Anunnaki grew concerned. Enlil, the supreme commander on Earth and half-brother to Enki, was disturbed by the noise and chaos of the growing human population. When the Anunnaki detected that a catastrophic flood was approaching, triggered by the gravitational effects of Nibiru's periodic passage near Earth, Enlil saw an opportunity. He ordered that humanity be left to perish. No warnings, no rescue. Enki, the creator of humanity, defied the order. He warned a human he favored, called Ziusudra in Sumerian, Utnapishtim in Akkadian, and Noah in the Bible, and instructed him to build a vessel. The text described the specifications. The vessel was sealed with bitumen. Animals and the seed of all living things were brought aboard. The flood came, civilization was destroyed, the survivors landed on a mountaintop. This story appears in Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Chinese, and dozens of indigenous traditions worldwide. The details vary. The core remains identical: a global catastrophe, divine warnings to a chosen family, preservation of a life in sealed vessel, a new beginning. Geologists have confirmed that massive flooding events did occur at the end of the last ice age approximately 11,600 years ago, when enormous glacial lakes burst. Their boundaries and sea levels rose dramatically. The Sumerian king lists divide all of history into before the deluge and after the deluge, suggesting this event was the most consequential boundary marker in the understanding of time. After the flood, the texts describe a period of reconstruction, but also escalating conflict among the Anunnaki themselves. Sitchin's third book, The Wars of Gods and Men, traces a series of territorial disputes between the lineages of Enlil and Enki that played out across Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Indus Valley. These wars of gods involved advanced weaponry, aerial craft, and ultimately the deployment of nuclear weapons. That last claim sounds outrageous until you visit the Dead Sea region, where geological studies have identified layers of unusual radioactive fallout, or examine the ancient Harappan cities of the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro, and Harappa, where archaeologists found skeletons in the streets, unburied, many with radiation levels far above normal. The cities show signs of sudden catastrophic destruction, consistent with extreme heat events. The Sumerian texts describe 2 cities being destroyed by awesome weapons, and the resulting evil wind that carried a toxic cloud eastward, devastating Sumer and killing its population. The timeline Sitchin assigns to this event approximately 2024 BCE. The archaeological record shows that Sumerian civilization did in fact collapse abruptly and catastrophically around that date, after which the center of Mesopotamian power shifted permanently to Babylon. Coincidence? Maybe, but it is a very precise coincidence. The Sumerian texts describe a transit system. Nibiru's orbit brought the Anunnaki into the inner solar system, but they needed way stations, transfer points. According to the Akitu ceremony texts, Mars served as their traveler's ship, a stopover where astronauts transferring from Nibiru's long-haul vessels switched to smaller craft bound for Earth. When NASA's Viking orbiter photographed the surface of Mars in 1976, certain features in the Cydonia region drew immediate attention. A face, approximately a mile across, staring straight up from the Martian surface with bilateral symmetry, an eye socket, and what later analysis described as fine structure of the mouth suggesting teeth. nearby set formations that scientists nicknamed the pyramids, and a feature called Inca City, a series of steep walls forming squarish segments that NASA geologist John Macaulay described as standing out like walls of an ancient ruin. Frame 52A35, released by NASA on August 18, 1976, showed parallel grooves so regular they appeared artificial. The caption from NASA's own news center stated, "Peculiar geometric markings, so regular that they appear almost artificial." Michael Carr, head of the imaging team, commented, "They were getting some strange things. It's very puzzling. It's hard to believe of a natural cause because the stripes are so regular." The location? The Cydonia region, same area as the face. Then came the Phobos incident. In 1988, the Soviet Union launched 2 unmanned spacecraft toward Mars, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. Phobos 1 was lost early due to a command error. Phobos 2 arrived at Mars in January 1989 and began its mission successfully built on March 28, 1989. As the spacecraft maneuvered to photograph the Martian moon, Phobos, contact was lost. The final images transmitted by Phobos 2 showed 2 anomalies. The first, a pattern of parallel lines and rectangles on the Martian surface covering nearly 250 square miles, emitting infrared heat radiation in a perfect geometric pattern. The second, a thin elliptical shadow between the spacecraft and Mars, an object that appeared on both optical and infrared cameras. Dr. John Becklake of England's Science Museum, reviewing the transmission live, described it as something that is between the spacecraft and Mars. The Soviet report published in Nature confirmed that the spacecraft was spinning, either from a computer malfunction or because it was impacted by an unknown object. The collision with dust particles was rejected. The chairman of the Soviet Space Agency referred to the last frame showing an odd-shaped object between the spacecraft and Mars. The odd-shaped object remains unidentified to this day. While the Mars mystery deepened, another thread was unraveling closer to home: the search for a 10th planet in our solar system, one that mainstream astronomers had been pursuing since the 1970s. In 1972, Joseph Brady of the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory noticed perturbations in Halley's Comet's orbit that suggested a large unseen body. His calculations pointed to a planet at 64 astronomical units from the Sun with an orbital period of approximately 1,800 years, exactly half of the 3,600 years the Sumerians recorded for Nibiru, as if Nibiru were approaching its closest point to the Sun. In 1981, scientists at the U.S. Naval Observatory, analyzing data from Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, and both Voyager spacecraft, presented evidence of a body at least twice the size of Earth orbiting beyond Pluto. Then came IRAS, the infrared astronomical satellite launched in 1983 to survey the sky in infrared wavelengths. It was specifically designed to detect objects too dim or too distant for optical telescopes, objects that emitted heat rather than reflected light. In December 1983, the Washington Post published an exclusive interview with the lead IRAS scientist under headlines reading, "Giant Object Mystifies Astronomers," and "Mystery Body Found in Space." The article stated that IRAS had detected a mystery object so large that its size was compared to Jupiter in the direction of the constellation Orion. The scientist stated the object had been seen twice, which ruled out a comet, and the article included this sentence: "Conceivably, it could be the 10th planet that astronomers have searched for in vain." Then the story went quiet. Official statements shifted. The object was reclassified as a distant galaxy, but the follow-up coverage noted that if the object were close rather than distant, it would have to be Neptune-sized. Dr. Robert Harrington of the U.S. Naval Observatory continued the search. In 1988, he published a paper in the Astronomical Journal titled "The Location of Planet X," narrowing the search to the southern skies. He sent a copy to Sitchin. With handwritten notes alongside the northern sky, he wrote, "Not consistent with Neptune. Alongside the southern sky, best area now." In January 1990, Harrington reported the 10th planet was approximately 5 times larger than Earth and 3 times farther from the Sun than Neptune or Pluto. These numbers align closely with what Sitchin had described since 1976. Sitchin met personally with Harrington. The two men compared notes. The astronomer and the ancient text scholar were converging on the same conclusion from opposite directions. Then Harrington died unexpectedly in 1993. The search for Planet X at the Naval Observatory was quietly discontinued. So let's step back and take inventory of what the Sumerians described and what modern science has confirmed. The Sumerians described a solar system with planets beyond Saturn, confirmed by the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They described Neptune as blue-green and watery, confirmed by Voyager 2 in 1989. They described Uranus as the double of Neptune, confirmed by Voyager 2, which found the two planets to be near twins in size, color, composition, and magnetic field orientation. They described a catastrophic collision that created the asteroid belt, formed Earth, and captured the Moon. The giant impact hypothesis, now the leading theory for lunar formation, mirrors this account. They described waters above and below the firmament, the asteroid belt, confirmed by the discovery of water on every body in the solar system. They described life being seeded from space. The theory of panspermia, endorsed by Nobel laureate, mirrors this claim. They described the genetic engineering of Homo sapiens from an existing primate approximately 300,000 years ago in Africa. Mitochondrial DNA evidence points to a single female ancestor in Africa in exactly the same time frame. They described in vitro fertilization, surrogate motherhood, and genetic manipulation procedures we only developed in the late 20th century. Every single one of these claims was considered impossible, absurd, or mythological when Sitchin first published them in 1976, and every single one has received at least partial corroboration from mainstream science since then. The question is no longer whether the Sumerians knew things they should have been unable to know. The question is how, and the Sumerians themselves gave us the answer. The Anunnaki told them. Now we arrive at the part of the story where we pour cold water on the fire, because there is a case against Sitchin, strong one, and intellectual honesty demands that we hear it. Let's start with the translation. Sitchin was self-taught in Sumerian. He studied ancient languages at the London School of Economics, and his command of Hebrew was strong. But professional Sumerologists, people who have spent their entire careers translating cuneiform, have consistently challenged his readings. Michael Heiser, a scholar of ancient Semitic languages who held a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic studies, devoted years to critiquing Sitchin's work. His central argument: Sitchin cherry-picked translations, selected obscure alternate meanings of words when standard meanings contradicted his thesis, and sometimes translated terms in ways that no other Sumerologist supports. The famous cylinder seal, VA243, the one Sitchin claimed depicts the solar system, is a prime example. Heiser and others argue that the central symbol is a star, a common motif in Mesopotamian art, surrounded by decorative dots. The planets are Pleiades symbols or generic celestial ornaments, they say, and there is zero textual evidence linking this particular seal to astronomical knowledge. Sitchin saw planets, other scholars see decoration. The word Nibiru itself is contested. In Akkadian astronomical texts, Nibiru most commonly refers to Jupiter, or in some context to Mercury, bodies that cross the sky at the meridian point. The idea that Nibiru is an undiscovered 12th planet in Sitchin's interpretation and mainstream astrology rejects it. Then there's the astronomy. A planet with a 3,600-year elliptical orbit that swings between the asteroid belt and the outer reaches of the solar system would be gravitationally destructive. Each passage through the inner solar system would perturb planetary orbits catastrophically. We see no evidence of such periodic distributions in the geological or astronomical record at 3,600-year intervals. The claim that this planet would sustain life at such extreme distances from the Sun also faces challenges. At the far end of its orbit, a planet like Nibiru would receive essentially zero solar radiation. Internal heat from radioactive decay could theoretically keep a planet warm, but sustaining a biosphere, let alone a technological civilization, on such a body would require physics we don't currently understand. Critics also point to the corroboration problem. Many of Sitchin's successful predictions were based on observations that were already trending in the right direction. By the time he published The 12th Planet in 1976, it was already suspected that the outer planets might contain water. Describing Neptune as blue-green and watery was an educated guess, critics argue, dressed up as ancient revelation. The face on Mars? High-resolution images from the Mars Global Surveyor in 1998 and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2007 showed that the face is a natural mesa that only resembles a face under specific lighting conditions at low resolutions. The higher the resolution, the less face-like it appears. And then there's the argument from silence. If the Anunnaki were mining gold in southern Africa for hundreds of thousands of years, where are the mines? Where are the artifacts? Where is the physical evidence of an advanced extraterrestrial mining operation? Ancient mines exist in South Africa, yes, but they are consistent with human-scale operations, with no evidence of technology beyond the Stone Age or Bronze Age peoples possessed. The genetic argument faces its own problems. The mitochondrial Eve discovery tells us about the most recent common female ancestor in an unbroken maternal line. It does not imply that only one woman existed at that time, or that she was created. Population genetics is far more complex than a single origin narrative suggests, and the 300,000-year date is a broad statistical estimate, a range, and it has been revised multiple times as more data accumulates. Professional geneticists, evolutionary biologists, and paleoanthropologists overwhelmingly reject the idea that Homo sapiens was genetically engineered. The fossil record shows a gradual, messy, branching process of evolution with intermediate forms, dead ends, and overlapping species, exactly what you would expect from natural selection and exactly the opposite of what you would expect from deliberate design. And what about the nuclear weapons claim? Skeptics point out that the destruction layers at Mohenjo-Daro can be explained by fire, structural collapse, and normal archaeological degradation. The radiation claims have been contested, with some researchers finding no anomalous readings at all. The skeletons in the streets may simply reflect an epidemic or invasion, mundane tragedies that require no extraterrestrial explanation. There's also a methodological concern that runs through all of Sitchin's work. He begins with the conclusion the Anunnaki were real, Nibiru exists, and then searches ancient texts for the passages that support that conclusion. This is confirmation bias elevated to an art form. Any passage that fits the theory is cited as evidence. Any passage that contradicts it is explained away as a later corruption, a scribal error, or a misunderstanding by the ancient authors themselves. Real scholarship works in the opposite direction. You gather evidence first, then form conclusions. You actively seek information that disproves your theory, because that's the only way to know whether the theory holds up. Sitchin never published a paper subjecting this hypothesis to falsification. He never proposed a test that could, in principle, prove him wrong. And that, more than any specific translation error or astronomical objection, is the deepest problem with Sitchin's thesis. It's unfalsifiable. If we find Planet X, it confirms Sitchin. If we don't find it, the search simply continues. If genetic evidence supports an African origin, it confirms Sitchin. If it points elsewhere, the timeline is adjusted. Every outcome is claimed as support. No outcome is accepted as refutation. That is faith. It may even be inspired faith, but it is a different enterprise from science. Sitchin published 7 major books, maintained his position until his death in 2010. He sold millions of copies worldwide. He spoke at conferences, appeared on television, and cultivated a devoted following that continues to grow. But he was never published in peer-reviewed journals. His work was never subjected to formal academic scrutiny through the normal channels of scholarly debate. And virtually every professional in the field he drew upon, Assyriology, astronomy, genetics, geology, has rejected his conclusions. And that, of course, was precisely the response Sitchin predicted. The information, he argued, was simply too destabilizing. If Nibiru exists, we are sharing a solar system with an advanced civilization. If the Anunnaki are real, every major religion, every major story, every assumption about human uniqueness collapses. The establishment, he argued, would rather ignore the evidence than face the implications. So where does this leave us? In 1976, Zecharia Sitchin made a series of extraordinary claims based on his interpretations of his older texts in Human Civilization. Since then, an astonishing number of these claims have been at least partially corroborated by discoveries in astronomy, genetics, planetary science, and biology. He was right about the color of Neptune before we saw it. He was right about the water throughout the solar system before we found it. He was right about the approximate date of modern human emergence before geneticists confirmed it. And he was right about the asteroid belt as debris from a massive collision before the astrophysicist proposed it. He may also have been wrong about translations, about Nibiru's orbit, about the face on Mars, about the specific mechanism of human creation. The professionals in each field say he was. But here's the thing that keeps his story alive, that keeps millions of people reading his books decades after his death. The professionals still have no explanation for how the Sumerians knew what they knew. A civilization had barely invented the wheel was accurately describing the outer planets. A culture with no telescopes was recording the composition of worlds 3 billion miles away. A people writing on clay tablets with reed styluses were encoding a creation narrative that modern science keeps accidentally confirming. Either they were the luckiest guessers in human history, or someone told them. And the Sumerians themselves were very clear about who that someone was. Those who from heaven to earth came, the Anunnaki, the Elohim, the Nephilim, the beings whose knowledge was carved into clay tablets that survived beneath the sands of Iraq for 6,000 years, waiting for us to become advanced enough to understand what they said. Sitchin spent 40 years saying that modern science would catch up with ancient knowledge, and in field after field, that is exactly what has happened. The details of the Sumerians recorded about our solar system, our planet, our biology, and our origins have been confirmed by spacecraft, telescopes, genetic laboratories, and geological surveys, tools the Sumerians themselves obviously never possessed. So we're left with the oldest and most unsettling question in human experience, the one that Genesis opens with. The one every civilization is asked in its own language, in its own way, since the first humans looked up at the stars and wondered, where did we come from? And are we alone? The Sumerians answered both questions. Whether we believe them is up to us. Now, I've discussed other creation myths, including the discussion of Maldek. Be sure to check out those episodes. It's up for you to decide. So put in the comments what you think really happened in the creation of this solar system, the creation of the Earth. With Marduk, is Nibiru real? I would love to know what you think. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution. I am Brian Scott, and I want to invite you to 3 days, 9 sessions, one amazing timeline shift. I am bringing the full Reality Revolution experience back to Southern California. Activate the pineal gland, meet your higher self, quantum jump into your greatest timeline, open the bliss body, flow with large sums of money, open to love, shift into the new earth. Special appearance from Daryl Lanka. Friday night celebration, weekend transformation, one weekend, one lifetime of change, July 24th through the 26th. The Hilton Anaheim. You can find it at www.brianscottlive.com/Anaheim.